Welcome to 30 Mind Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett sat across from tech billionaire Elon Musk on the brightly lit interview stage, her usually composed face now frozen in shock. Seconds earlier, Musk had pulled out his phone and revealed evidence no one expected. "This changes everything about the Supreme Court," he said calmly, sliding the device across the table. Barrett's hand trembled as she reached for it. The audience gasped when her expression changed from confusion to disbelief. Then, without warning, Barrett ripped off her microphone, stood up, and stormed toward the exit as cameras captured every moment. What Musk had just exposed would shake the foundation of America's judicial system. Before diving into this explosive story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our latest political exposés. The tension had been building for weeks. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, known for her conservative rulings and calm demeanor, had agreed to an unprecedented live television interview on the national spotlight with host James Morrison. The appearance itself was unusual. Supreme Court justices rarely give interviews, especially on live television. Barrett, 52, appointed by former President Donald Trump in 2020, had become the cornerstone of the court's conservative majority. With her signature pearl necklace and neatly styled brown hair, she projected an image of traditional values and judicial restraint. Her supporters praised her brilliant legal mind and commitment to interpreting the Constitution as written. Her critics claimed she was pushing a religious agenda through her rulings. The interview was supposed to be a friendly conversation about her new book on constitutional interpretation until a last-minute guest was added. Elon Musk, the world's richest man and owner of multiple companies, including X, formerly Twitter, SpaceX, and Tesla, joined unexpectedly. The billionaire, with his casual black t-shirt and relaxed demeanor, seemed out of place beside Barrett's formal attire and rigid posture. "We've got Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett and entrepreneur Elon Musk joining us for what promises to be an enlightening conversation," Morrison began, his voice betraying the tension in the studio. "Justice Barrett will discuss her new book while Mr. Musk has expressed interest in judicial transparency." The stakes couldn't be higher. Barrett represented the highest court in the land while Musk commanded a vast social media empire and billions in resources. The silent tension between them was palpable even before the first question. "Justice Barrett, your book argues for strict constitutional interpretation," Morrison started, "but Mr. Musk has been quite vocal about what he calls judicial activism. Perhaps we could begin there." Barrett smiled tightly, her hands clasped firmly on the table. "I believe in following the Constitution as written by our founders. My book simply outlines this judicial philosophy." Musk leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I'm more interested in how those philosophies actually play out in the real world," he said, reaching for his phone, "especially when personal connections might influence decisions." The audience fell silent. This wasn't going to be the friendly interview Barrett had prepared for. As the interview progressed, the tension in the studio grew thicker with each exchange. Host James Morrison struggled to maintain control as Musk kept steering the conversation away from Barrett's book and toward recent Supreme Court decisions. "Justice Barrett, your court recently ruled on the Watson tech regulation case," Musk said, his tone deceptively casual. "A case that directly affected several major technology companies." Barrett maintained her composure, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped her hands together. "The court ruled based on established precedent and constitutional principles. Mr. Musk, as you know, I cannot discuss specific deliberations." "Interesting," Musk replied, scrolling through his phone, "because I've been looking into the connections between justices and the companies affected by your rulings." The camera caught Barrett's slight flinch. Morrison attempted to redirect the conversation. "Perhaps we should return to the themes in your book, Justice Barrett. I think the American people deserve transparency," Musk interrupted, his voice firm but calm. For instance, did you know that Justice Barrett attended a private retreat last summer where executives from major tech companies were present? The audience murmured. Barrett's face remained stoic, but a slight flush crept up her neck. I attend many legal conferences and events, Mr. Musk, all within ethical guidelines. A retreat funded by the Liberty Foundation, Musk continued, which coincidentally filed an amicus brief in the Watson case. Morrison jumped in. Mr. Musk, if you have accusations, perhaps there are more appropriate channels. I'm not making accusations, Musk said with a shrug. I'm stating facts. Facts that my team at X has verified. He turned to face Barrett directly. Justice Barrett, do you believe the public has a right to know about potential conflicts of interest on the Supreme Court? The studio grew uncomfortably quiet. Barrett straightened her papers, her movements deliberate and controlled. The court has established recusal procedures that all justices follow, she answered, her voice steady but cooler than before. Musk nodded thoughtfully, still scrolling through his phone. That's interesting, because I've been analyzing the voting patterns of justices relative to their personal connections. He looked up. Did you know that in cases where the Liberty Foundation has filed briefs, certain voting blocks are statistically perfect, not a single deviation? The host's expression grew alarmed. Mr. Musk, we need to be very careful about making implications. It's just data analysis, Musk replied with an innocent smile. I'm good with patterns, and this pattern is fascinating. Barrett's expression hardened. Mr. Morrison, I agreed to discuss my book, not defend myself against vague insinuations. Vague? Musk raised an eyebrow. I can be more specific if you'd prefer. Morrison desperately tried to cut to a commercial break, but Musk continued, his voice carrying over the host's objections. Justice Barrett, are you familiar with the communications between Justice Keller and CEO Marcus Blackwell prior to the Watson ruling? Barrett's face paled slightly. I have no knowledge of any communications between my colleagues and outside parties. That's unfortunate, Musk said, removing a small flash drive from his pocket and placing it on the table. Because I do. The camera zoomed in on the small device sitting between them as Morrison finally succeeded in cutting to commercial. When the broadcast resumed, the tension had escalated visibly. Barrett's normally perfect posture was rigid, and Musk lounged in his chair with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. When the program returned from commercial, the atmosphere had changed completely. Host James Morrison looked nervous, occasionally glancing at producers off-camera. Justice Barrett sat with perfect posture, but her eyes had a steely glint. Musk appeared completely relaxed, the flash drive now back in his hand. We're back with Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Elon Musk, Morrison said tentatively. Justice Barrett, would you like to respond to Mr. Musk's comments before the break? Barrett smiled tightly, smoothing her navy blazer. I believe Mr. Musk is engaging in irresponsible speculation. The Supreme Court operates with the highest ethical standards. Our procedures for recusal and disclosure are rigorous and thoroughly followed by every justice. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many had their phones out, recording this unprecedented moment despite the no-recording signs throughout the studio. Let's be specific then, Musk replied, tapping his phone screen. On March 12th of last year, Justice Keller exchanged 23 text messages with Marcus Blackwell, CEO of Neurotech, one of the companies that would be directly affected by the Watson ruling. The messages began at 2:14 p.m. and continued until 11:47 p.m. that night. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Barrett's expression didn't change, but her eyes widened slightly. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Musk, Morrison interjected, loosening his tie slightly. Do you have evidence of these communications? I do, Musk replied calmly, pulling a document from his jacket, along with financial records showing that 3 justices, including yourself, Justice Barrett, have indirect investments in companies that stood to benefit from the Watson decision through your managed portfolio accounts. Barrett's composure finally cracked. She sat forward, placing both hands firmly on the table. That is absolutely false. My financial disclosures are public record and thoroughly vetted by ethics officials. Traditional disclosures, yes, Musk nodded, but not the special management accounts established through Wyndham Partners, which specifically structures investments to avoid direct disclosure requirements while maintaining beneficial interest. The camera caught Barrett's face going pale. Morrison looked utterly lost, glancing between his guests and then toward his producer off stage. For viewers just joining us, Morrison attempted, we're discussing some allegations about Supreme Court investment disclosures. It's much more than that, Musk cut in. This is about the integrity of the highest court in the land. He turned directly to the camera. Americans deserve to know if the people making life-altering decisions are truly impartial. The studio lights seemed to intensify as all eyes focused on Barrett, who took a sip of water, her hand visibly unsteady. I've spent billions building companies that process and analyze data, Musk continued, his voice quiet but carrying clearly. When I purchased X, I gained access to communication patterns that reveal interesting connections. He looked directly at Barrett, including messages coordinating judicial appearances at private events sponsored by organizations with cases before the court. This is outrageous, Barrett said, her voice trembling slightly. You're suggesting impropriety based on data you've mined from private citizens. That itself raises serious ethical and legal questions. I'm merely connecting. Public information, Musk replied with a shrug. Flight records, event attendances, financial disclosures, all public. The patterns just needed someone to put them together. He paused. But it does make one wonder why Justice Keller's vote changed suddenly in the Watson case after those communications. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. A woman in the front row had her hand over her mouth. A man in the back stood up to get a better view. Barrett's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass again. The deliberative process of the court is complex, Mr. Musk. Justices often refine their positions as they study the briefs and confer with colleagues. Is that what happened with Justice Keller? Musk asked innocently. A refinement. After 23 text messages with the CEO of a company directly affected by his vote? Morrison attempted to regain control. Perhaps we should... What's most interesting, Musk continued, cutting off the host and sliding his phone across the table, is this email chain discussing the Watson ruling before it was announced. An exchange between your clerk, Michael Dawson, and Liberty Foundation Director William Hayes. Barrett glanced down at the phone and, for the first time, real shock registered on her face. The color drained completely as she stared at the screen. The camera zoomed in, capturing her stunned expression for the millions watching at home. That's a fabrication, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. It's authenticated, Musk responded calmly. Blockchain verification through 5 separate systems, digital signatures confirmed, and there are 17 more exchanges just like it. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. A production assistant dropped a clipboard off stage, the clatter making several people jump. Morrison tried desperately to regain control. Mr. Musk, if you have evidence of judicial misconduct, there are proper authorities. The proper authority is the American people, Musk interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. The Supreme Court answers to them. At least it should. He turned back to Barrett. Justice Barrett, did you know about these communications? Barrett stared at him, her breathing visibly uneven. The perfect composure she was known for in oral arguments had completely vanished. Let me be very clear, Musk pressed, leaning forward. Were you aware that Justice Keller's son was offered a position at Neurotech 3 days after the Watson ruling? A position with a starting salary of $375,000, despite having only 2 years of professional experience. Something changed in Barrett's expression. A flash of genuine surprise followed by dawning comprehension. She glanced toward her aide standing off stage, who looked equally shocked. I have no knowledge of any colleague's family employment. Situations, Barrett managed, her voice hollow. And most importantly, Musk said, leaning even closer, were you aware that your own clerk, Michael Dawson, was communicating case details to Liberty Foundation representatives throughout the deliberation process, sharing draft opinions, voting positions, and arguments that swayed certain justices? This last revelation visibly shook Barrett. Her hand jerked, knocking over her water glass. The water poured across the table, soaking papers and dripping onto her lap. As an aide rushed to clean it up, she stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. Morrison rose as well. We should take another break. No, Barrett interrupted, her voice tight. This interview is over. Mr. Musk is making unfounded accusations that I will not dignify with further response. She began removing her microphone with trembling fingers, struggling with the clip on her blazer. Unfounded? Musk asked, still perfectly calm, remaining seated. I've already shared this information with the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Department of Justice. They didn't find it unfounded. In fact, they've scheduled emergency hearings for Monday morning. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs. Several people stood up. Camera flashes went off despite the prohibitions. Barrett froze, her fingers still on the microphone. You what? The investigation begins next week, Musk said simply. I'm just giving you the courtesy of hearing it first. Chairman Blackburn was particularly interested in the offshore accounts. Barrett stared at him for a long moment, then at the cameras capturing her every reaction. Her face cycled through shock, anger, and finally something that looked remarkably like fear. This is character assassination, she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. It's accountability, Musk corrected gently. Something even Supreme Court justices shouldn't be above. Barrett looked around the studio, seeming to realize fully for the first time how many people were witnessing her unraveling. Without another word, she ripped off her microphone, dropped it on the table with a loud thud, and walked rapidly toward the exit. Her heel caught on a cable, causing her to stumble slightly before she regained her footing and continued off stage. Justice Barrett, Morrison called after her. Please, we should hear your response. But she was already gone, the sound of a door slamming echoing through the studio. The camera panned across the stunned audience, then back to Musk, who watched her departure with an expression of quiet satisfaction. He straightened the papers in front of him and took a sip from his own water glass. Well, he said to the stunned host, I guess transparency can be uncomfortable sometimes. He turned toward the camera. But the American people deserve to know who's really influencing their highest court. Morrison seemed at a complete loss. This is unprecedented. No, Musk corrected. What's unprecedented is the level of undisclosed influence on supposedly impartial justices. That ends today. He held up the flash drive, and this is just the beginning. The moment Justice Barrett stormed off the set, the studio erupted into chaos. Producers rushed from behind the cameras. Legal advisors appeared seemingly from nowhere, and host James Morrison sat frozen in disbelief. Elon Musk remained calmly seated, scrolling through his phone as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison finally managed, his voice unsteady, we'll take a brief break and try to sort this out. The red broadcast lights blinked off, but audience members remained frozen in their seats, many filming, with their phones, despite staff frantically motioning for them to stop. Security personnel moved toward Musk, who raised a hand, stopping them with a simple gesture. I'm not going anywhere, he said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The American people deserved to hear the full story. Backstage, Barrett's security detail had formed a protective barrier around her as she moved swiftly toward the exit. A producer ran after her, pleading, "Justice Barrett, please reconsider. You should present your side." "Contact my office through proper channels," she snapped, her voice ice-cold but trembling. This ambush was completely inappropriate. Meanwhile, in the control room, network executives were frantically calling legal counsel. "Can we air the rest of this? What's our liability here?" the executive producer demanded, but the damage was already done. Clips of Barrett's dramatic exit were uploading to social media platforms within seconds. Barrett storm out, and Musk exposes Supreme Court began trending immediately on X. Within minutes, both hashtags had over 100,000 posts. News. Alerts buzzed on phones across America. When the program returned from the emergency break, Morrison had regained some composure. Musk sat alone at the table, Barrett's empty chair a visual testament to what had just transpired. We want to apologize to our viewers for that unexpected turn of events," Morrison began. "Justice Barrett has chosen to leave the interview. Mr. Musk, would you care to address what just happened?" Musk nodded thoughtfully. "I understand her reaction. No one enjoys having their actions scrutinized, but the Supreme Court makes decisions that affect every American's life. The justices should be held to the highest standards of transparency and ethical conduct. But these allegations," Morrison began, "are fully documented," Musk finished, patting the flash drive, "and will be available to the public within hours. I believe in the wisdom of the American people to evaluate evidence for themselves." Within the hour, the Supreme Court's Public Information Office released a statement. Justice Barrett left an interview due to unfounded allegations that violated the agreed-upon topics of discussion. The court does not comment on pending matters. But Musk was already controlling the narrative. From his X account, he posted, "Transparency shouldn't be controversial. The American people deserve to know how their highest court operates. More documents to be released at 9 p.m. EST, Judicial Accountability." His post was viewed 50 million times in the first hour. The social media platform became a battleground with supporters and critics of both Barrett and Musk engaging in heated debates. Verified legal experts began lengthy threat analyses breaking down the potential ramifications. CNN, Fox News, and every major network interrupted their programming for special coverage. Legal experts debated the implications of Musk's allegations, while political commentators speculated about the potential constitutional crisis. If proven true, these allegations could represent the greatest Supreme Court scandal since the founding of the Republic, said constitutional scholar Lawrence Tribe on CNN. At Fox News, host Sean Hannity defended Barrett. "This is a coordinated attack on a conservative justice by the tech elite who want to reshape America in their image. Musk is playing a dangerous game by undermining our institutions." MSNBC's Rachel Maddow devoted her entire program to the unfolding story. Whether you agree with Justice Barrett's judicial philosophy or not, these allegations raise profound questions about the court's legitimacy at a time when public trust in institutions is already at a historic low. As evening approached, crowds began forming outside the Supreme Court building. Some held signs supporting Barrett with messages like, "Stand strong ACB," and "Protect our judges." Others demanded transparency with signs reading, "No," "One above the law," and "Expose judicial corruption." Capitol Police established barricades as the crowds grew into the thousands. Justice Barrett's home in Virginia became surrounded by news vans and photographers, prompting local police to establish a security perimeter. No statement emerged from the residence, but lights could be seen burning well past midnight. Meanwhile, at his Austin headquarters, Musk hosted an impromptu press conference. Dressed in the same black t-shirt from the interview, he stood before a room packed with journalists. The event live-streamed to millions. "The Supreme Court wields enormous power in our society," he began, his voice steady and calm. Yet, it operates with less transparency than any public corporation or government branch. Today, that begins to change. Behind him, large screens displayed complex data visualizations, communication networks, financial flows, and meeting patterns. The graphics looked impressive, though few in the audience could fully comprehend their meaning. He detailed how his data analysis team had discovered the connections, starting with an AI pattern recognition program that identified unusual communication clusters around major Supreme Court decisions. "We first noticed unusual patterns around the Watson case," Musk explained. "Communication frequency between certain justices and outside entities spiked dramatically in the weeks before the ruling. Our algorithms flagged these as statistical anomalies." A chart appeared behind him showing communication frequency over time with a dramatic spike highlighted in red. "We didn't hack anything or anyone," Musk emphasized, addressing the question before it could be asked. "We simply connected public information in ways no one had bothered to before. Flight records, financial disclosures, public appearances, court filings, corporate statements. The dots were always there. Someone just needed to connect them." A reporter from the Washington Post raised her hand. "Mr. Musk, Justice Barrett's supporters are calling this a high-tech witch hunt, targeting conservative justices. Your response?" Musk smiled slightly. "Data doesn't have political affiliation. We analyzed all 9 justices equally. If the others have nothing to hide, they have nothing to worry about." He paused. "In fact, our analysis found concerning patterns with 2 liberal justices as well. This isn't partisan, it's about integrity." This statement sent another shockwave through the media landscape. Cable news chyrons immediately updated. Musk claims liberal justices also implicated. A Wall Street Journal reporter followed. "Up. Can you tell us about those liberal justices?" "All in due time," Musk replied. "Tonight's document release will contain the complete analysis. No one gets special treatment." As promised, at 9:00 p.m. Eastern, Musk's team released a 150-page document titled "The Court in Shadow: A Data Analysis of Supreme Court Influence Networks." The comprehensive report detailed communications, financial connections, and meeting records linking 3 Supreme Court justices, 2 conservative and 1 liberal, to outside interests with cases before the court. The document crashed servers as millions attempted to download it simultaneously. X's infrastructure strained under the traffic, experiencing periodic outages throughout the evening. Other platforms where users reposted sections experienced similar issues. Legal blogs and forums exploded with analyses. Law professors began dissecting the document line by line on live streams, some running well past midnight. Bar associations issued emergency statements calling for calm and cautioning against rushing to judgment. By midnight, protesters outside the Supreme Court had swelled to thousands, necessitating the National Guard to be placed on alert. The demonstrations remained largely peaceful, though tensions ran high as counter-protesters began arriving. Hashtags. Related to the scandal-dominated social media worldwide, not just in America. Morning shows booked constitutional scholars for emergency appearances. The White House announced the president would address the nation the following day, underscoring the crisis atmosphere engulfing Washington. At her home in Virginia, Justice Barrett sat in her darkened study, phone silenced as it lit up with calls and messages. According to a source close to her, who spoke anonymously to the New York Times, she spent the night reviewing documents with her legal team and preparing a more comprehensive response. She was blindsided by the specificity of Musk's allegations, the source revealed, particularly the information about her clerk. She's taking this very seriously. The political implications spread like wildfire across Washington. Senator James Conroy, chair of the Judiciary Committee, announced emergency hearings set to begin Monday morning. "The integrity of our judicial system is at stake," he stated from the steps of the Capitol, flanked by colleagues from both parties. We must determine if these allegations have merit and, if so, what actions are appropriate. Former presidents issued carefully worded statements calling for due process and the presumption of innocence while acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations. Foreign allies expressed concern about the stability of the American judicial system, with the European Union issuing a statement urging transparency and adherence to the rule of law. Constitutional scholars appeared on every network debating potential remedies, from impeachment proceedings to reform legislation establishing a binding ethical code for the Supreme Court. Law schools across the country organized emergency symposiums to discuss the implications, many streaming online to accommodate overwhelming interest. Musk, meanwhile, continued posting throughout the night, maintaining a steady stream of updates and additional context. At 3:00 a.m., he tweeted, "This isn't about conservative or liberal. It's about power and accountability. No one in America should be above transparency." Not me, not you, not 9 people in black robes. Democracy dies in darkness, but thrives in sunlight. The tweet received 7 million likes within hours and was quoted in morning newspapers across the country. By sunrise, international news outlets had picked up the story as front-page news. Leaders from several countries expressed concern about the stability of the American judicial system. Financial markets reflected the uncertainty. The stock market opened down 600 points, with legal technology firms and transparency advocacy organizations seeing significant gains. A new viral video emerged showing Barrett's clerk, Michael Dawson, being confronted by reporters outside his Georgetown apartment. Dressed in sweatpants and looking disheveled, he nervously denied any wrongdoing. "I've always conducted myself ethically and in accordance with the court's confidentiality rules." His hands shook visibly as he spoke, and when pressed about specific communications with the Liberty Foundation, he abruptly retreated inside, saying, "No comment on pending matters." The video accumulated 20 million views by noon. Justice Keller, also implicated in Musk's documents, released a brief statement denying any impropriety and claiming the communications with CEO Marcus Blackwell were related to a charitable foundation both were involved with. "These innocent exchanges have been grotesquely mischaracterized," the statement read. "I look forward to setting the record straight." Neurotech stock plummeted 28% in morning trading, triggering circuit breakers multiple times. The company issued a denial of any improper influence but announced an internal investigation led by an independent law firm. Marcus Blackwell, the CEO implicated in communications with Justice Keller, canceled all public appearances and was reported to have left the country on a private jet bound for the Cayman Islands. Wyndham Partners, the financial management firm mentioned in Musk's allegations, saw its offices raided by FBI agents before noon. The company issued no statement, but employees were photographed carrying boxes of documents to government vehicles. The Liberty Foundation's website went offline completely, replaced by a message reading, "Site temporarily unavailable. Please check back later." As America awakened to the new reality, the implications became clear. This wasn't just about Barrett or even the current court. This was about an institution that had operated largely on trust and tradition, suddenly exposed to a level of scrutiny it had never experienced. Legal scholars noted that the Supreme Court was the only branch of government that created its own ethics rules without external oversight. "The court has always relied on the justices' personal integrity," explained Harvard Law professor Amanda Richardson on Good Morning America. "There's no inspector general, no ethics committee, no formal mechanism to investigate potential misconduct beyond impeachment, which has an extremely high bar." Sources close to the White House indicated that emergency legislation for Supreme Court ethics reform was being drafted for introduction next week. Congressional staffers worked through the night preparing for hearings. Constitutional scholars, debated whether justices could be removed for ethical violations rather than the high crimes and misdemeanors specified for impeachment. On the steps of the Supreme Court, now surrounded by protesters on all sides, veteran court reporter Nina Totenberg summed up the situation. "In my 50 years covering this institution, I've never seen anything remotely like this. The court's mystique of being above politics has been shattered overnight." Musk, having ignited this firestorm, seemed to relish his role as disruptor-in-chief. In a morning interview on CNBC, he expanded his vision. "This is just the beginning. We're developing an AI transparency system that can be applied to all government functions. The era of backroom deals is ending." When asked if he was concerned about potential backlash, including possible legal action against him, he chuckled. "I've been sued more times than I can count. Truth is an absolute defense. And besides," he added with a characteristic smirk, "who would hear the case? The Supreme Court?" Legal experts began speculating about potential recusal issues that could paralyze the court for months or years. If multiple justices had to recuse themselves from cases related to these allegations, the court might lack the quorum necessary to function. By afternoon, Justice Barrett finally broke her silence with a formal statement. "I, categorically, deny any impropriety in my judicial conduct or financial disclosures. Mr. Musk's allegations are a dangerous combination of half-truths, manipulated data, and outright fabrications. I welcome a proper investigation that will clear my name and restore faith in our judicial system. In the meantime, I will continue to fulfill my constitutional duties with the same integrity I have always brought to the bench." The statement did little to quell the firestorm.